Lloyd Robertson, anchor of the flagship news programs at CTV and CBC, has died at the age of 92.
What a great job this is. I'm pinching myself because here I am, little kid from Stratford, in the center of things, where I always wanted to be.
Robertson sat at the helm of CBC's The National for 6 years before joining CTV National News, holding the anchor chair for 35 years before retiring in 2011. Former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien released a statement on Robertson's passing, remarking that Robertson understood the vital role that journalism, especially the trusted journalism that he personified, plays in a democracy. And he took that responsibility seriously, making our democracy stronger and making Canada a better place. For more on the life and legacy of Lloyd Robertson, I'm now joined by the former CTV Ottawa bureau chief, Bob Fife. Bob, you were my boss when I worked at CTV as well, but I didn't work directly with Lloyd. He had already retired by the time I joined the CTV National team. But you certainly got to know Lloyd over your time at CTV. And I think the only thing we can sort of start with, well, like, what a great guy he was.
Oh, my God, he was a beautiful human being. You know, unlike you took to television like a duck to water. I didn't. I was a print guy. And when I started, I was so nervous because, first of all, I didn't write for television, which is another handicap I had. But more important, I had to do live talkbacks with Lloyd Robertson. You know, he was a guy I grew up with as a kid watching. He was just so famous. And I was nervous, as you can imagine. I was a disaster for the first little bit, and he was so kind and compassionate towards me. He would say, "Relax, Bob, take a deep breath. We're going to get through this." You know, he just shepherded me through. And it wasn't just me, Katie. There's legions of people in the business who will say the same thing about Lloyd Robertson. Just how kind, how compassionate he was. He did not have an ego at all. He wanted people to do the best journalism they possibly could, and he was there to lift them up.
One thing that really stands out of all the sort of tributes that we've seen and read, the thing that stands out to me most is just how everyone is remarking on how kind he was. In an industry that is not known for its kindness, where it's cutthroat, and it's changed a lot over the years, but he really stood out with his ability to try and foster the best in people, and it again, that kind of behavior is what you're going to be remembered for. It's, yeah, you know, chasing a scoop, breaking the stories, but it's how you treated the people around you. It's going to be how people remember you. And I'm just wondering, when you think back at your time with Lloyd, what stands out to you? Like, do you have any favorite memories of, you know, working with Lloyd and your time with him? Okay,
I do, but just let me say this. He had no ego, and this is a business with a lot of egos, as you know. And part of the reason for that is that Lloyd came from a small town, and he encapsulated those values of honesty, decency, being down to earth. And anybody who comes from a small town, as you and I do, if you got a big ego, you're not very popular.
Nope.
And so he does not have a big ego. In terms of, I've got many stories with Lloyd, but one of the stories is that Lloyd always believed that he had to be rigorously balanced in his newscast, because he said, look, Canadians who watch television have every political stripe, and I want them to watch my newscasts so that the coverage is fair and balanced. So I could do a very tough story, and he would run it, but as long as the person who was getting fifed was fair, had their fair comment. And I remember one time, Maxime Bernier was Harper's foreign affairs minister. His girlfriend, her former lover, was a loan shark in Montreal and a friend of Mum Boucher, the Hells Angels president. And I said, "We've got to write this." And he said, "No, we can't write this. I do not think that that people's personal life should be broadcast." And our lawyer at the time said, "No, Bob was right. You've got to do this." He said, "I'll think about it." I go home. I'm going home for dinner, as he always did with his wife before he came back. And he came back. He said, "Okay, you're right. I thought about we're going to do that. He did that a lot of times where, you know, it showed that newsrooms, as you know, are real places where you should be able to debate stories. And he allowed that kind of debate to go on. And if he felt strongly about a story, it didn't run, that's for sure. But he also thought about it. It wasn't like he just made up his mind. He'd go home and think about it and come back and say, okay, yeah, I think you're right on that. And one other really kind of a cute story is that I always told him, I come from a small town like you, and I always told him I try to write for my mom back home, and not complicated stuff. So in a simple way that they can get these stories. And I assigned this story. It was a really complicated environmental story with regulations, and I sent it in. I got this phone call from Lloyd. He said, "Bob, I've read your script." I said, "Yeah."
Oh no!
He said, ever so politely, as he always did, "Do you think your mother would understand it?" No, you're absolutely right, Lloyd. Okay, back to the drawing board. And I, redid it, and he said, "Okay, we can run the story now." I mean, that's the kind of guy he was. He was never angry, never mean. He was always polite and kind. But my God, he was a good journalist. You read these stories about anchors just reading the news. Well, he just didn't read the news. He helped shape the news. He was part of the 4 p.m. Ottawa Bureau discussions when we had to call in to pitch our stories. And we had to pitch them, and if he didn't think the story warranted, it didn't get in. And he was particularly focused on those top block stories before the first advertising block. And and you competed to get on that top block, because that's, you had 1 million or 1.2 million people watching. You really wanted to get on that top block.
The media landscape has shifted so dramatically. He retired in 2011. Even since that time, and his death reminds us just how much has changed since then. I'm wondering what you think that Lloyd's legacy is.
Well, I think his legacy is that we have an obligation to do trustworthy journalism, balanced, fair, objective, trustworthy journalism. And I think that's a standard that we all have to ascribe to. I mean, nowadays it's more difficult because there's social media and influencers, and everybody thinks that they're a journalist and they can say whatever they want. But he set a real hallmark, really, to say you have an obligation as a journalist to treat people with respect, to, even when the stories are tough, make sure that they're fair and balanced. You owe that to the readers or viewers. And I think that really encapsulates Lloyd Robertson.
All right, Bob, well, thank you for your time. And we're thinking of his 4 daughters, including, I worked with his daughter, Sue Robertson, who is a director at CP24. Thinking about them and his wife. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it, Bob.
You're welcome. Thank you.